それでは、皆様お集まりのようですので、記者
Thank
会見
you.
を始めたいと思います。
We would like to begin the press conference. I will be the chairperson. My name is Kai from ICRP.
それでは、90分でございますけども、
So we have 90 minutes.
メディアの方々から自由にご質問をいただき
We
ま
would
す
like to
こちら
solicit questions from the mass media. Please,
7名おります。まず7名の名前
we have 7 on this side. I would like to introduce the 7 people. If you have questions specifically for some of us, please tell us the name. So my name, I'm the moderator, Kai from ICRP. And from ICRP Secretariat, we have Chris Clement.
それから、川口村の遠藤村
And
長
from Kawauchi village, we have the village mayor, Mr. Endo. He's not here yet. And ICRP, please, Jack Clochard.
それから、今回講演座長に参加していただきました内閣府の
And from the cabinet office, we have Mr. Noguchi.
まだでしょうか。
Not yet, seems.
それから長崎大学の高村
And from Nagasaki University, we have Takamura.
それから JAA の今回
And JEA, the logistic committee chairman, Mr. Ueki.
以上でございます。それでは、
So,
メディアの方々からご質問いただきたいと思います。
so now I would like to get questions from the media.
質問がありましたら、手を
If you have hand,
手を挙げるボタンを
please
いただくということで、
could you push the raise hand button? Mr. Aoki, this is Aoki from Asahi newspaper. Thank you for the symposium. I have a question to Mr. Kai. So there's a new recommendation, and there are a lot of public comments that they received. So how has the public comments been reflected in the recommendation? And I also have other questions. Can I state it now? So I have question to Mr. Noguchi.
まだ見えてない。
He is not yet online. Then I'll ask to Takamura-san. So you have the Fukushima Museum. You said that, well, there's a topic that there are things that's difficult to actually talk about. And you have a manual for these storytellers, and the storytellers cannot criticize certain organizations. So storytellers, they cannot criticize the government or TEPCO. I actually heard this directly from storytellers. So are you going to revise the manual? And unlike Hiroshima, you cannot take photos of the exhibits at the museum. In Hiroshima, you can. I went to the museum 3 times and I asked this question. And the answer was because of a newspaper, and sometimes it was a copyright problem. But like the model or diorama for the nuclear power plant unit 1, or that has nothing to do with copyright. I hope we can take pictures of those. I think you received the similar request. Are you going to study this matter? If you're not going to study it, why not? And there's a request from Futaba Town, that is the future energy, nuclear power. Futaba Town wants the museum to exhibit that board. Of course, maybe the museum space is limited, but you can exhibit it outside the museum. And I have a question to Mr. Noguchi. Maybe after Mr. Noguchi arrives. So there were two questions. One is for ICRP, the recommendations on the radiation protection after a nuclear accident. This will be published soon. Last year, we had public consultation and we received a lot of comments. So when we publish it, we will disclose how we dealt with the public comments. Maybe that will not be sufficient in explanation. And in Japan, we received a lot of requests. And from an organization, citizens organization on science. So we'd like to set up some opportunity where we can explain about public comments.
それでは高松先生の
公表されない。
はい。
それは公表されないんですか。
あ、公表いたしますですか。
It will be published. When will that be published? In what form? The publication is being delayed, but probably within this month. So we can see on the homepage what kind of public comments you received. Is that right? Yes. Takamura-san, thank you for the question. This is an ICRP conference. This is not a place to talk about the details of our museum. But in any case, on September 20th, the museum opened, and it's about 2 months since it opened. And for the exhibits, whether you can take pictures or not, or the storytellers, what they can talk about. It's not that everything is fixed right now. We will hear the views of the visitors and mass media and experts. So we will change the exhibit.
先ほど申し上げた点については前から話題になってますが、これは検討はもうされているのか、まだ
You studied about my question because it's already become a big topic. As I said, it's 2 months after the opening. When the time comes, we will compile all the opinion. When is it when we say? I can't say specifically when. We had about 27,000 visitors, and we received a lot of comments from the visitors. So when we see certain direction, we will. You mean within this fiscal year? So we're going to think about when is appropriate.
じゃあ次の手が上がっておりますので、ドイツのダグマー・ローリックさん。
From Germany, Dagmar Rohrig.
Dagmar Rohrig from Germany. If you have any questions, Mr. Dagmar Rohrig from Germany, we'd like to accept your questions at this time.
Yes, hello. This is Dagmar Rohrig for the German radio station Deutschlandfunk. Can you hear me? So I would like to ask you what special measures you will take for the remediation of these regions where it's very hard to return, the base regions. What can be done there, or what will you do there? And how are the time plans? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. So, Mr. Noguchi,
could you answer this question?
So let me answer in Japanese.
I will talk in Japanese. So
I will be
what have we
doing
done
remediation.
I
And as
explained
I
in my presentation,
explained in my presentation,
we
we will be working on decontamination first. And we
two-thirds
already
of
have
the
decontaminated
evacuation
2/3
ordered
of the
area
area.
has already been
And
decontaminated.
after the
And after
decontamination,
that, we
we measure
measured
the individual
the
doses
individual dose,
to see,
and
to
we
confirm that the radiation
confirmed that
dose
individual
has
dose was
decreased
low.
sufficiently for people to live in the area. So these were the efforts that have been undertaken. And as for the timeline, we still have a difficult return zone. And in this area, we cannot undertake any decontamination. And because it has little effect, decontamination has little effect in reducing the radiation dose. And it is an area, in some areas, we are chosen specific area called special bases that will complete decontamination in 2 or 3 years. But for other areas outside of these special zones, we are thinking of how we can best use the land. And if there are requests from the local people on the usage of such land, we will engage in some kind of measures to reduce our dosage and allow the residents to use those land. And specifically, we are now working on that in Itate village. And we are now considering lifting some of the restrictions. Thank you very much.
May I just add something to, would it be possible to explain for our listeners what are the specific measures that you take if you decontaminate, and what are you doing with all the soil that you take away? Is it stored somewhere? So I think the people in Germany would like to know a bit more about the specifics of the cleanup. Thank you.
はい、スペシフィックなメジャーという
具体的な措置ということです。So one thing is that there is a natural attenuation of radiation. That's one. And then we are engaged in decontamination. That is removing of the topsoil. This is quite very effective in reducing those. And what we do about the removed soil? In the difficult to return zone, where it is close to the nuclear power plant, we have a temporary storage sites. So it is located near the power plant, and we are storing the removed soil in that site. But in the future, we would have to find a final storage site. It has to be removed away from the current temporary storage site. But we have no decision yet as to the final storage site. Thank you very much. Next, we do have many hands raised. So we will NHK, Mr. Hasegawa, please. Can you hear me? Can you speak louder a little bit? Can you hear me now? Yes. I have a question to Professor Kai. In the first day of the presentation, you mentioned about the recommendation 146. And it has not been released. So what has happened there? Has it been presented partially? And so what are the new sections that have been included? And also another question. For example, you have the reference levels about 1 milli and 20 milli. And there were expressions that need not to exceed 10 millisievert. And in this newly new recommendation 146, how has the expression has been changed? Thank you very much for the question. And in this conference, this was mostly related to the recovery from the accident. And we have looked at the recommendation based on the recovery side, focusing on the recovery side. But the basic concept is, of course, is important, and I have included that during the conference. And the changes we have made, the basic concept has already been as shown. It carries on from the recommendation 111. However, as we have experienced the Fukushima disaster, the biggest change is the actions involving immediately after the accident, and also the recovery phase, which has to be in a seamless transition between the two phases, how we start from the outset and then how we start the recovery stage. So this is one of the new elements of this recommendation. And in addition, ICRP has issued various publications, including one on environment. And these have also been reflected in the recommendation 146. And the third question, you mentioned about the reference level. Last year in the public comment in the draft, we used the 10 millisievert. And we do have many levels, standards are issued by ICRP, and there has been a criticism that it is confusing. So although the basic concept remained the same, we have set up a certain boundary, band, and we have changed approach there. So if there is a large-scale nuclear accident, and as for the recovery, we would like to set between 1 and 20. Also, probably around the midpoint, it would be 10. And somewhere below the mid-level would be the reference band level. So this has been included in the new recommendation. So the publication has not been released yet, but we expect to be able to do so during this month. And as asked by Ms. Aoki just now, we will make public how we responded to the public comments. Does that answer your question? Thank you very much. I have one additional question. So the new section that you added, what are the lessons from the Fukushima accident? And how did you reflect that in the new recommendation? Yes, that was one of the major topics of this conference. When we have a disaster, radiation is central. And in terms of radiological protection, we have certain set standards and principles, and that not only involves about the contamination by radiation, we need to go beyond due to the complexity of the accident. There are social aspects, the economic elements, and as well as environment, and how we respond to that cannot be dealt with alone by the principle of radiology, and therefore we need to face the situation. And this has been seen also in Chernobyl, but as we have experienced the Fukushima accident, similar things have been experienced. And we have learned the lessons from Fukushima disaster. And this has also been reflected in the new recommendation that there is a limit to the radiological protection, but we need to be able to deal with other aspects, and that's been reflected in the new recommendation. Does that answer your question? So you mentioned that how is it insufficient? That, for example, is it respect for personal lifestyles? How how was that? How was the recommendation reviewed?
Your view, please. Yes, in the early stage, it was that the evacuation prolonged. And so there have been a lot of ramification of this hardship of the life, and also the mental issues generated, and also the physical side by changing of the lifestyle. There are many, the diseases are probably caused by this, and these are the lessons of Fukushima. So in this sense, so not only the dosage, as long as that you abide by the reference, that's not the end of the story. That's our, of course, that we have to face with the dosage from that the radiation dosage. That is, of course, that our priority. However, this is not a very. This is just a part of this, and we have to face many other that the problem may be caused by the dosage or the change of the life. That's what we are saying. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied. So the Our Planet representative, please. Thank you very much for this opportunity. That Shiraichi from the... May I? May I? Can you hear me? Yes, very clearly. Shiraichi from the Our Planet TV. I have actually 3 questions, if I may. First, as it's related with Hasegawa-san's question. As Professor Kai elaborated, as you know, 10 millisievert. That was many people are unhappy with this within the band, you said. So that's something that you are going to respect, or are you going to change or revise? I didn't know. So instead of saying specifically 10, that up until 21 and lower than the midpoint. So you are not going to disclose this? No. Oh, no. That's the expression we use. Okay, then. Chronological axis was prepared this time. That is about the recommendation. But in Japan, 20 millisievert has been continuing for 10 years, and there has the resentment against this or opposition against this. Do you have the evaluation of this comment of this a long term of 20 millisieverts? That's my first question to you. The second question first. Not only to Professor Kai, but I would like to pose the question to Noguchi-san, Roshara-san as well. Now, this time stakeholders and experts and collaboration with the residents, there are many discussions in the report and also during the discussions that you refer to this. On the other hand, for example, developmental area, SDG has been attracting a lot of attention, multi-stakeholder process, for example. Hence, the definition of stakeholders, their way of participation has been, trying to be established in the international. But what is the definition of stakeholder and ICPR? Well, those sectors, NGO of direct opposition to the government cannot be committed by your definition of the ICRP. That's my impression. Well, the Japanese national government has already have the establishing policy, and you are going toward this. For example, SDG says multi-stakeholder process. Do you have any opinions of this, view of this? As an ICRP, are you considering that SDGs stakeholder? Because this is the trend of the global trend. So do you think that you are ready to go along with this, Noguchi-san? And Fred-san and Noguchi-san, I would like to ask you that the assumption of this question is that the hard-to-return zone or into the future, that the nuclear academic society, until that the decommissioning, they say, that at least 100 years after removing the debris. Is that the assumption? or releasing the treated water to the seas, which is so different from the process of the national government or the local government. And then the academia of the nuclear says more than 100 years after the decommissioning. What is your view on this? Thank you very much. I believe that you posed 3 questions. Number 1 is that I would like to respond from my side. Second, Jack, do you think that you can respond?
Could you answer the second question? Okay.
Okay, the third is that and okay, that the first, what is the opinions and the response to the 20 millisieverts? For ICRP, that the specific, well, we have not conducted the specific discussions of any of the policy taken by Fukushima right now. But my definition is that the Japanese government sets a 20 millisieverts as the criteria of evacuation. And so that when the dosage exceeds the 20 millisieverts, and then they send out the orders. There is a slight gap of the perception. However, by ordering the evacuation and afterwards how to deal with this, the consequence is that also the serious issue. So that after coming down to the 20 millisieverts, that the order is lifted. But lifting the order doesn't mean automatically return. There are many other conditions because it's all up to the residents to decide whether to return or not return. And if they decide to return, they have to assist them. So that is the scope of discussions. And therefore, the 20 millisieverts is not equal to the recovery per se, is my understanding. And that is just that the reference of deciding the order issuing of the evacuation. And so that there are many conditions attached to our review of the 20 millimeters seabells. The second question, SDG related, multi-stakeholder is probably different from the stakeholder that ICRP is defining. That's because that NGO is finding difficult to get into your discussion is the impression.
Her question about multi-stakeholder is different from stakeholder related protection. What do you think of the multi-stakeholder? Jack, 聞こえますか?
You want me to answer on this? I've not understood very well. The translation was not that good. This is the question about how ICRP is considering stakeholders. Is that right? Yeah. I mean,
Jack,
I think that is a good understanding of yours.
Okay, thank you. I mean, ICRP is using the term stakeholders to embrace all those who are concerned with the accident, and it's going from governmental bodies, administration, local authorities, experts, scientists, local professionals, and of course, the people who are directly affected. They are in the views of ICRP, one of the main actor and the main stakeholder. And we don't discriminate between them. Of course, there may be some NGOs. The problem is not to define a priori categories of stakeholders and then to invite them. The problem is to take a given situation, like, for example, we have learned during you have heard during the conference, the situation in Kawauchi, or the situation in Itate, or the situation in Futaba, and then to open a dialogue with all those who are concerned, and it may be different from one place to another. And in some places, there may be some NGOs, and in some others, no NGO. It depends about those who are interested, those who have to say, who have their views. And as mentioned several times during the conference, ICRP is insisting a lot on the fact that because of the complexity of the recovery process, because of the multi-dimensions which are at stake, not only radiation, but many, many other problems, societal, economic, cultural. It is necessary to have a dialogue. It is necessary this is the experience from Chernobyl and also from Fukushima, to have what we call the co-expertise, that means cooperation of experts. Lay people are also experts. They are experts of their living condition. They are experts of the place they live. And scientists, they have expertise about radiation, about other aspects. And this is by combining these different types of expertise. All those who are willing to participate are welcome. And we don't go further with ICRP. We don't categorize the stakeholders. We don't identify specific groups having a particular role to play. I mean, those who are involved, those who are affected, all of them, whatever they are doing, should be, if they are willing to participate, they should contribute to a dialogue. And that's the key starting point of the co-expertise. Thank you for your question.
ありがとうございました、ジャック。
Thank you, Jack. The third question. So this is a problem that will really prolong. So, Noguchi-san? Third, the taking out of debris to decommissioning, it will take 100 years. I don't know specifically how many years, but it will take a long time. That is a fact. So in the decommissioning, which is a long process, in the areas around nuclear plant, restoration will go on. So the areas around the decommissioning, restoration is going on. There may be some people who are not persuaded by the dose, the standard dose. We are making so much effort to lower that dose, and scientifically, those dose is small. We've made effort so that people can do something in it, and we've already done it. We are already doing it. So, but people, probably some people are still not persuaded that this is low dose or scientifically low dose, scientifically low risk dose. So there's no solution to persuading these people. Probably through dialogues among stakeholders, it's something that we have to think of. I'm aware, the government is aware there are still people who are not persuaded at the current dose when we say they are not scientifically risky. Now, going back to the second question, the stakeholder involvement. The question was, we're not involving the stakeholders. It's also the both sides are not satisfied. That's why we have this kind of conference, ICRP conference, third party or a global perspective. How much have we taken in the people who are against the government position? I think maybe we need peer review by people like Mr. Loshar. Thank you. So from JE, Mr. Uezu. Yes, this is an international conference. They are dealing with the radiation protection. I'm not a specialist in the taking out of debris or decommissioning, so I cannot say how many years it will be until we finish decommissioning. But I think we had session 1.2. We had a decommissioning, and there were 6 presentations. One of the purpose of this conference is to get understanding from the global society on the current situation of decommissioning. It's almost 10 years from the accident. So we wanted this presentation and we wanted to have discussion based on those presentations. Shirai-san is saying that there is a disparity with the residents. If that is the case, we need to have dialogue, and that's why we had some discussion sessions too. Thank you. Is it Fukuchi-san from Asahi Shimbun, Asahi newspaper? Yes, this is Fukuchi from Asahi newspaper. I have 2 questions. Sorry, it's such a basic question. This conference is being held in at this timing, and many people participated from Fukushima. So just before 10 years from the accident, did you deliberately choose this timing, or is this a regular conference that's held at this timing every year? Another question is, Yamashita-san made a declaration, and the declaration says it's important to hand down this knowledge for the future disasters. So who is the subject? Is it the secretariat of this conference, or is it ICRP? Who is to hand down the knowledge? Thank you for the question.
Could you answer this question? Chris, can you hear me?
Yes. So I can answer, I'll start with the first question. Why did we hold it now? There are a couple of reasons. One big one is because the group that was working on publication 146, which is about to come out, should be any day now, had completed their work. We had a large consultation focusing very much on Japanese input in particular last year, earlier this year even. So we wanted to have a conference where we could discuss the points that were raised during the consultation, but also during the 10 years where ICRP has been involved in Japan, to talk specifically about recovery, because that's where we see is the most room for improvement. So part of the reason for doing it now was the timing of the publication, which should be out very soon. But we also specifically chose not to do it right around very, very close to the 10th anniversary, because we didn't want this to be just a ceremonial activity. The purpose of this conference is practical. We want to do practical things, and very clearly we wanted to raise the understanding internationally about the situation in Japan now. And we wanted to make sure that the lessons from recovery are heard outside of Japan and throughout Japan, so that if there is another accident in the future, we're better prepared. And you ask, who is these people that are supposed to be better prepared? ICRP, in a sense, is part of that target audience, because we're making recommendations on how to be better prepared for nuclear accidents. But we aren't regulators, we aren't operators, we aren't government. It's governments and operators and regulators and experts from around the world who need to be better prepared for next time. Many have learned over the last 9.5 years many lessons from Fukushima. And our publication, and I hope this conference, brings together many of the radiological protection lessons that we've learned from Fukushima and from Chernobyl, new lessons that have emerged over the last recent years. So the target is quite wide. It's also important for us that everyday people who are interested can have a look and see what's going on, what lessons have been learned, how to be better prepared for next time. So we're hoping that that regular everyday people who are interested in nuclear power or recovery after accidents will also take a look at this publication and this conference. A nice reason, or one reason why it was nice to pair the publication with this conference as closely as we could, is that this conference is totally free and totally open. Anyone could join for no cost. Luckily now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, from anywhere around the world. So it's very open, and this is what ICRP tries to be, is very open. The material will stay online for a long time. People can have a look at it, so that it's not just a club of people trying to figure out how best to run recovery after nuclear accidents in the future. It's everyone who's interested should be able to learn some of these lessons. Thank you for the question.
So we have another question that in the declaration by Professor Yamashita, one of them was that who are going to carry out the initiatives that was included in the declaration. So in terms of grammar, of course, what is a subject? Who is a subject? So in my opinion, I think this is the society itself that will be using nuclear power. So Japan has its own problems, but these will differ by country. Next, I'd like to accept the next question. If you have any questions from the media, please use the raise your hand function. Ms. Saoki, you wanted to ask a question to Mr. Noguchi. Thank you very much. This is a question for Mr. Noguchi from the Cabinet Office. And in a number of sessions and during this press conference, there was an evacuation order was lifted prior to sufficient decontamination. And I interviewed some of the local residents, and they said if they were going to lift the order before sufficient decontamination, they said that their assets, the land assets, the value will go down. And they are disadvantaged, but the government did not provide any explanation on these points. So about the personal property, and these lifting of the ban would decrease the value of our assets. So did you ask each of the individual residents and have the approval of lifting the ban? Mr. Noguchi, please. Well, first of all, the basic assumption is that the decision actually have not been made. The government is now discussing, and the current arrangement was agreed with the former mayor, and one of the decision was to say that we will try to consider how we can lift the ban, and therefore we can use some of the area as a park. And decision has not yet been made, and therefore, as for Itate village in the difficult to return zone, there has not been any decision made. And there has been a decision made to use it as a park, and we will now be collecting, listening to the residents, and this is something that we are going to do from going forward. Thank you very much. In the Q&A in today's session, there was a question, and I think you made a comment that you are considering lifting the order. And are you going to consider this point raised about the value of the personal assets? Are you going to interview or ask each of the residents and provide explanation to each of them? So we have not yet know what issues they are. And the decision has not been made. And during the process, of course, we will listen to the voices of the local residents. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. From Germany, I think you have a hand raised from Dagmar Rolik from Germany.
Yes, hello, here I'm again. I'm not sure if the question has already been put, but because my sound was down for 2 minutes, I would like to learn if there are lessons for the epidemiological side. There was this, let's say, confusion about the thyroid cancer. What did you learn for epidemiology, difficult word for me today, it's very early here. And how does the public react to the results? Thank you.
Hi. それではこれについては私の方と、じゃあ高村先生も。
Let me answer this question. So you mentioned about the thyroid cancer on the prefectural survey about the epidemiological. This is not an epidemiological survey. And what we have found is that, as was already mentioned by some of our presenters during the conference, the risks have increased for more than 20% for the children. And the problem is that, is it from the radiation? Is it due from the radiation from the nuclear power, or is it some other causes? So this is also something that the research is looking at, not just from Japan, but also from all over the world. And this is our understanding. And the WHO and ICRP has mentioned that in these kind of nuclear accidents, of course, the issue of thyroid cancer arises. But the amount of exposure, for example, several hundred gray, if that amount, such a large amount of exposure is experienced by children over the large extent of area, then there requires some kind of study. And in Japan, we will continue to conduct our survey, and we will try to understand what is causing the increased risks, and we will, whether it is from the radiation or is it from other causes, and we will continue to further conduct academic scientific research. And at this time, we have not had a conclusive evidence that the increase in risk is due to radiation. Dr. Takamura, do you have anything to add? I agree with Professor Kai. We have done the survey, and the original intent was, after the accident, many residents, especially children, may have been affected, and there were a significant concern among the community. And we wanted to address this kind of concern from the residents, and that is why we started our survey. So how we respond to the concerns of the residents and how we protect the health of the residents, these are the goals of our survey. And we have been providing feedback to the residents, and we will continue to conduct our survey. Thank you very much. Mr. Fukuchi from Asahi Shimbun. This is my second time making a question. The declaration, when you make that into an article, I wanted to know who was going to issue. Is it the Secretariat who was going to issue the declaration? So that was my question. Jack, can you answer that question?
Who is
Yeah, I think it will
making a declaration?
About the declaration, yes, the declaration will be published on the ICRP on the conference site very soon. I think probably in a few hours or tomorrow, and this will be done by the scientific secretariat of ICRP. It's very straightforward, and this will be published in English and Japanese, and everyone will be able to use it and to look at it. And if there are questions, further questions, people can send emails, and we will try to respond if possible. Yeah, it's a very simple process, very transparent.
よろしいでしょうか。すみません。ちょっと私も主語ということは。講義の宣言は、今回の会議の主催者であります。
Yes, that is ICRP and JAEA, the hosts, are the subject, and also that the program committees and many people that who participated, and therefore the two hosts are the subject of declaration. And the communication into the future is the driver of the recovery. When I'm working in Fukushima, some people are dubious of removing debris, and others say that, well, that the plant itself should be maintained as a part of the relic into the future, a reminder of the future. So, well, anybody from the outside, what do you think? Fukushima #1, that do you think these old buildings or that the structures should be maintained for the reminder in the future? クリスさんいかがですか？
クリス、答えていただけますか？はい。
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting question. Part of the conference you've seen already talks about the importance of remembering, of memory, not only to look back to the past, but also for future generations, so they can remember what's happened and in not forgetting, try to avoid the problems that have happened with nuclear accidents. Whether that's by keeping part of 1F standing as a memorial or something else is not something for me to decide. It's something for Japan to decide, and Fukushima Prefecture decide, and local communities to decide. Something is important. We already have a museum, which is an excellent start. But I've been to Japan many, many times. I've seen, for instance, the dome in Hiroshima, which is a reminder of the bombing. So it's possible to have that kind of reminder. What the reminder is, though, is very culturally specific, and it has to be decided by Japanese and not me. I can't tell you what the right thing to do is, except that you have to remember, and it has to be something concrete so you can remember for a long time and share with the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。Jack, could you say something?
You're muted, Jack.
Jack, mute.
I just second what Chris said. I think memory is a very important point. I mean, not only for the past, and then as Chris said, I have no specific idea about the best way to make this concrete, real. If we look at the Chernobyl experience, there are museums, there are institutes who developing some kind of exhibition. You have also activities with young people at schools, some sort of competition about drawings of kids about Chernobyl. This is a way to keep the memory alive, and also for the transmission to the next generation, because the recovery is going to last for another decade or 2 or 3 decades, and this is necessary to have a transmission. I mean, those who have suffered the accident in 2011, some of them are not yet anymore, not there anymore. And this is for their children to take care about the situation, and probably for the grandchildren. So it's there is a matter of transmission here, which is inevitable. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you, sir. Next question from the media. That the reporters, any reporters have the question, please raise your hands. Well, the second, third round is okay, or the first round? Aoki-san. Aoki-san, this is going to be your third round, but nonetheless, you're welcome to Aoki-san. I raised my hand. Dr. Kai, earlier you mentioned that the 10 millisievert discussions, and 1 to 20, and in the middle, and the reference, the lower of the midpoint. Yes, this has been a headline. That is a core of this. What will be the expression? What is a line that you are going to explain? Midpoint means is 10 specifically, and then 10, that the figure is going to be how to be used for the national policy. Are you assuming that this 10 will be the base of the policy making into the future? Or during the symposium, that if there are 10, are there any scientific ground behind the 10 millisievert I heard? However, what is the intention behind that the midpoint between 1 to 20? And one more. And also the dialogue with the stakeholders is very important that you mentioned in a statement. Right at this moment, do you have a briefing meeting? Or the briefing for the stakeholders to the government? Do you think that this briefing is sufficient? Or are you saying that there should be more meeting for the briefing? Very well. I would like to start, and maybe that Jack and the other people can supplement. Now, publication for this time is not specifically giving that the official statement to the Fukushima. It's general. It's a general that the description of how to deal with a nuclear accident or disaster. So this is a compilation of all the ideas of the concept. Having said so, that the Fukushima experienced a major accident like this, and therefore how there that the reference be applied to this. Of course, that we are considered this. Then what is 10 millisievert? And there isn't too much of the significance behind the 10 as a specific number, as I have mentioned earlier, that the accident means that, well, nobody assumes that the accident will happen, but sometimes the huge amount of dosage may take place. We have to prevent this. We have to prevent the emergency. And so 100, that was the first the figure. In this process, what should be the improvement, how to reduce the dosage in the process that we are considering all these, that the number statistics. So 20 emergency, from the 20 to 100 this time, that instead of saying 20, less than 100, we say. So within this framework of the less than 100, that is the emergency. And after the emergency for the recovery, what should be the next round in order to be closer to the normal situation? This is a process. So in the statement, so that the band 1 to 20, in the band of 1 to 20, so that the recovery, which is different for the natural phenomena, it changes in the course of the time. It should change in the course of the time. In this sense, as a process, as a flow, as a part of this, from 1 to 20, the midpoint, we said. Jack, any supplementary information to this?
Could you say something?
Yeah, on this 10 millisievert, I mean, first of all, 10 is not not in the new recommendations. I mean, in the new recommendation, as Kai Sensei perfectly explained, we have a band of from 20 to 100 for the emergency phase of the accident, and for the recovery phase, we say that according the situation, according the circumstances, a reference level for the sake of the optimization of radiological protection should be set in the lower half of the 120 millisievert. This is what is said in the new recommendations, and this is exactly what was said in publication 111 before. And the objective of optimization, which means the objective of all the efforts to improve the situation, is to progressively try to go toward the end of the 120 millisievert band, which means close to 1 millisievert, and even below if it is feasible, possible, and doesn't create too much problems. Because there is always a need to make a balance between what you try to do for improving the situation and the negative consequence of these actions. So, I mean, this is crystal clear. You will be able to read that in the recommendation, which hopefully will be available next week, or I hope so.
はい、ありがとうございました。じゃあ次の質問に行きたいと思います。じゃあ、長谷川
ステークホルダーの話。
どうぞ。はい。
The stakeholders.
ステークホルダーの話にお答えいただければ先生。
Could you answer? I ask my second question.
Okay. I will try. You know, first of all, I would like to say something. You know, you don't force people to go to a dialogue. You know, this is a dialogue is something you don't force stakeholders to speak to each other. I mean, you have situations and you have people facing this situation, and how people start to discuss, to open a dialogue and try to exchange their views and share their views with the objective to find a way to move forward. This is not something that you can force. This is something which emerge from the local situation, from meetings between people, and there is a lot of human dimension in that. You know, if you look at the good examples of recovery process in Fukushima, like in Kawauchi, like in Suetsegi, like in Yamakiya and other places, all the time it is a matter of people meeting, exchanging views, and then suddenly saying, okay, let's go and let's do something, and inviting other people to come. You know, this is a process. You cannot decide that in advance. It's a matter. I'd like to pass the floor to Mayor Endo from Kawauchi, because he has been. This is a fantastic example about the way you can involve people in Kawauchi, how it was done, how it was the process evolved with the support of experts, outside experts. And it would be good if Mayor Endo could give his view on this process of stakeholder involvement.
はい、ありがとうございます。遠藤村長もいらっしゃるので、一言、
はい。
言っていただけ
こんにちは。
よろしくお願いします。
Hello.
ルシダさん、お会いできてとても光栄です。ありがとう
I'm
ござい
so happy to meet you.
ます。非常に難しい質問だと思います。
It's a very difficult question.
ICRP が発表していた様々
The
な
ICRP has published various numbers, and those numbers were so difficult for ordinary residents to understand. And especially there was a range. So people were driven crazy. 1 to 20, 20 to 100 millisievert. For residents, the lower the value, the better. Especially the decontamination target was less than 1 millisievert. That's how it was announced. However, this 1 millisievert was really holding us up towards the recovery, because a lot of the residents said, we will not return unless it's less than 1 millisievert. So it took so much time and it took so much energy to overcome this problem. The residents were really concerned. So in order to publish these numbers, you need the background information and explanation. And to who, which kind of stakeholders? I think you need an explanation that's understood by ordinary people. Now we're going into the 10 years, and the residents, they no longer ask about those. It's not that they understood everything. They still have some concern and worry about the dose, but I guess they've decided that they would come back together with being together with the family. And how to send out information. Well, if the information is wrong, we shouldn't just let that go around. If it's a wrong information, we should not permit it, just as saying it's a variety of information. If it's wrong, we should say it's wrong. And Fukushima is changing every day. So you have to come to Fukushima, you have to look, you have to feel. That's what I want the people to do. Sorry, I guess I'm not answering your question. Thank you so much, Mr. Endo. Let's move on to the next question. Are there anybody who have not asked questions? If you push the raise hand button. Shirai-san from Magranet TV. I haven't heard all the 4-day session, but I heard Mr. Noguchi talk about the difficult return area and using individual dosimeter. You are emphasizing that point. I want to confirm one point. This individual dosimeter, it became a topic because of some papers. There's Date City Council, which used the dosimeter, these dosimeters were for the medical people, and it's not appropriate to put the dosimeter on an individual. And there's as for off-site radiation, the dosimeter does not measure accurately. It cannot measure everything. The value seems to be lower. So that's what's written in the Date City Council's papers. So we had Professor Hamaoka from Keio University. He talked about the relation between the aerial dose and individual dose. That's like a criticism against Professor Naito's paper. So using this individual dosimeter, I know that at Chernobyl they also used it. What is the meaning of this? Is it to relieve the people of their worries? Or maybe because lack of research, you want to say something scientifically with this individual dosimeter? I want to ask this to Mr. Noguchi. And so please tell us the meaning of using this individual dosimeter. Okay, let me, because ICRP has also written about the individual dosimeter. Can I? ICRP, after a nuclear accident, we don't know where, how much contamination there is. And as we find out with measuring aerial dose, we understand. But sometimes it's local, like house, around house, workplace. We cannot measure everything like house or workplace. So in that sense, for radiation protection, we always want to look at individual dose. So finding out that the individual dose will kind of control, each person can control, it's beneficial in terms of protection.
一つの要素になるだろうと。そういう考え方で ICRP としては今回のパブリケーションにも
And for these reasons, we have included the personal dosimeter in our recommendation. Of course, there is the aim of giving relief to the residents themselves, but to allow them to control their lives, that is the major reason. Now, can we ask Mr. Noguchi to answer the question? As for the meaning of using personal dosimeter, there is no government line on this. I'm sure there is some scientific reason for recommending personal dosimeters. And as for the government, we would like to identify the radiation, low enough radiation to lift evacuation dose. And in that respect, we can see from the dosimeter that the low radiation is. But even then, it is better that the radiation, of course, is lower as much as possible. And when you think about 1 millisievert, that is quite similar to the background dose. But even then, it is important that we use the personal dosimeter to understand the actual dose and to encourage people to take behavior that reduces the risk. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the media? NHK, Mr. Hasegawa.
共同専門知プロセスが必要だ。
You mentioned about the co-expertise process, and this is necessary.
この共同専門知プロセスが今回の福島第一原子力発電所の事故の際に、
And how this process did it function during this aftermath of the Fukushima accident? And when I do interviews in Fukushima, they look at the information from the internet and sort of like they're working alone by themselves and fighting their fears. And that was my impression. And was this co-expertise process insufficient? And if so, what was required? Was it more approaches needed from the experts? What do you think? Thank you very much. So let me first answer. So at the time of the disaster in 2011, the nuclear reactor was not stabilized, and for some time it was like that, and it was very unstable. And so there was a need for the experts, the government, and the residents to have a discussion, but there was little opportunity right after the accident. And of course, I did consult with people, I did give a presentation and so forth, but of course that was insufficient. Immediately after, there was something totally unexpected. But in 2012, gradually, we were able to create these kind of platforms for discussion. And in Fukushima, various experts came in. And in that respect, after, of course, it was difficult at first, that was probably unavoidable.
Jack, could you say something about co-expertise process in the Fukushima area?
You want me to respond?
Yeah.
I think on this issue of the co-expertise, this is just a wording to speak about a process. This process is made of people talking to each other, people doing measurements, and people taking actions to improve the situation. It's you know, just after the accident, people are lost. They don't know, even experts, they don't know the situation very well. So everyone has something to say, has a view on the situation, and there are many, many voices. And the only way to move forward is, first of all, to exchange views, to share views between experts, bringing the science aspect, the scientific aspect, and with the local people, the local authorities, the affected people themselves, who bring the problems that they are facing. And to solve this problem, the objective is to solve these problems. The objective is not to make measure, is not to discuss endless discussion about 1 millisievert or 20 millisievert. The problem is to fix, the issue is to fix the problems of people. And to do that, I mean, people have to exchange views, and then they have to do measurements. Why? Because fundamentally, the dose that people are receiving is depending about their behavior, about their activities, about what they are doing. If they are farmers going all the time outside, or if they are working inside, it makes a huge difference. But people cannot understand that just by giving lessons, teaching them. I mean, they have to practice that. The objective is to come to a point where people can establish a link between these individual doses they receive, and this is why the individual dose meters we were talking about before are extremely important, because they help people to know what they receive as a dose. And then the objective of the co-expertise is the discussion with the experts and with anyone who has a skill on interpreting this information, to help people to understand how they are exposed, at which occasion, in which circumstances. And this is why co-expertise is first dialogue, then it is measurement. And inevitably, when people start to have a grip again about the situation they are living, they are not living alone, they are living in a community, and they start to think about, oh, we could do this to improve the situation, we should do that to improve our living conditions. I think about the example of Kawachi. I always quote Kawachi because it's a good example. But I mean, in Kawachi, people used to go to, before the accident, they used to go in the forest to pick mushrooms. Then after the accident, when they started to understand the mechanism, they wanted to know if the mushrooms were very contaminated or not very contaminated, which kind of mushrooms they could eat, what type of mushroom they should not. And for that, they have developed a project with the support of Nagasaki University and with the local authorities, picking mushrooms, doing measurements, exchanging results, and so on. This is what I call the local projects. You know, they can be very tiny things. And of course, there are local projects which are more ambitious and related to the society, the life in society, or or the economic life of the community. So this co-expertise, it is now well documented. There are several papers in the literature which are describing these processes. And I invite the journalists to visit these places and to talk with the people, not only the authorities, but also with the local people, and they will finally grasp what does it mean, this so-called co-expertise process. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you very much. Mr. Endo, do you have any comment about the co-expertise process, about the receiving assistance from the experts and responding to various issues? I think you have quite a lot of experience on that. Yes. Well, of course, it is important for the residents themselves to improve their so-called literacy about the radiation. And specifically about measuring the mushrooms or other kind of vegetables. And they can measure such produce and to see them by themselves as an objective data, and so they can confirm the situation. And that is an effort to visualize what is not visible. And this is something we learned, it is something the villagers learned after the accident. And so in the final analysis, it is important that the residents can make their judgment based on a correct information and not be swayed by other kind of incorrect information.
Repeatedly.
Thank you very much.
So this is about the time that we have to conclude. But do you have any remaining questions from the reporters? Now today, well, it was about 90 minutes of the press conference, and we could welcome many reporters. And it was a very frank exchange of the opinions, and also that the participants, many of them, came into this conference. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I think this is a good place to conclude the press meeting. Thank you very much for your cooperation.